Okay, cool. So in this segment, I'm going to be a little bit more generic, but when we're talking about automation, a lot of times, like I said in the previous moment, you want a quick function to exist in a way that's callable in public. You have a little bit of Python code.
Yeah.
It's really just applying a little bit of logic and updating something somewhere, and that's a pretty common pattern. And so you want a function to exist somewhere that's publicly callable. Now, it used to be, Lambda's been around for a long time, but then making it public involved API gateway and dealing with cores, and it was a bit more involved.
Don't forget IAM.
I
There's
deal with
tons of stuff
IAM.
around there.
So luckily, there's now a cool thing called Lambda function URLs, and the idea is that you can deploy a Lambda function, and then right away you deploy a Lambda function, and then it just has a URL, and you can easily select your authentication mechanism. And I usually just have it open, and the fact that I don't publish this URL is kind of the security I need for these webhooks. So what I did, I made a template for how to very, very quickly deploy a function to Lambda. So I want to show how that works. And this is using DevSpaces. So the way that this works, again, I mentioned earlier, I always find myself reteaching myself SAM, reteaching myself some of these things, because I don't do it all the time. So what I wanted to do was kind of automate this process. So what's the easiest way to get some code public? So we've got this repository, and I'll put this in the chat. But it's called SAM Lambda function, Lambda Pi function. And the idea is I wanted to make it as easy as possible to have a function made public. So let's start this with eyk.devspaces.com. Now what this is doing, it's cloning that repository. And then I've got my DevSpaces set up. So I have my AWS environment, my credentials that work with SAM are already built in. So if I want,
the key thing is you're not setting this up on your bespoke machine.
No,
this is available and identical to literally anyone out there who launches this DevSpace.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Anyone can use this. They can just clone this and say, okay, you have to make sure, and it's documented right here. You want to make sure that you have your AWS access key ID, AWS secret access key, a default region set, and then you're going to want to set this environment variable, which is the name of your stack. And I'll show you how this works. It's pretty cool. So if you look at the DevSpaces, and I'll be very careful with what I show here, but within my variables, I've got access keys that are context sensitive for different projects. And what I've set it up is that for all my projects that start with SAM, I've got a certain set of access keys that are pre-programmed in there. So when I fork this repository, I can just call it SAM something else. And then I've already got the right access keys built in. Now I've got one setup step here that takes a little bit longer. Here we go. I'm waiting for this one step to finish. I should have moved that into the base image of that, but this has been a busy process. So let me pull up CloudFormation while we're waiting for this to finish.
So the nice thing about DevSpace is that on startup, it'll pretty much install and deploy and do whatever else the grunt work with compiling and deploying your applications is. And it'll do that for you without even, setting up a, terminal and then getting it all to work. So it makes it really simple and standard to get started. Looks like it completed.
Yep. Yeah, it's all set.
So we were trying.
So say I wanted to deploy some function. I'll make it really, really easy here. Instead of hello world, I'll say hello DevSpaces, and it's automatically going to save. And then I'll go back to the documentation because I always forget what I'm doing here. And I'd say, okay, I've got those three variables get defined through my DevSpaces config. So all I really want to do is I can do here. I'll call this the hello DevSpaces stack /build.sh. There we go. And now it's kicked off a, what's going on here? User DevSpaces EYK. 1 second here.
You don't have the right user here.
It should have been. Let me check my environment really quick. I have to hide the screen for a second.
No problem. And by the way, for the audience, while Stephen is trying to get this to work, check out DevSpaces at devspaces.com or devspaces.devgraph.com. It's a pretty neat tool where you don't need to set up your local environments. You can take any application, get started with coding. It's probably the only environment out there that supports ARM-based instances for you to, deploy all of your development stuff. And it is all on AWS. So if your resources are running on AWS, there couldn't be a better mechanism of, deploying your development environment, coding over there, testing it, and then literally doing a pull request right there and setting it off for deployment or production. So it can be beautifully integrated with whatever CI/CD mechanism you have. It all operates via your GitHub or GitLab or whatever Git-based solution you have for your source control. It's really that simple. So give it a shot, give it a try, or reach out to us. We'd love to get you set up.
Oh, and we were back. I guess I hadn't rotated those keys through, but yeah. So there we go. Right away, it's doing this change set, and it's doing this create, and it's creating this this whole SAM template, and you can see it in CloudFormation. I'll refresh over here. And there we go. This is creating in progress, the hello DevSpaces stack. And again, all we did, the only change we made is we modified this app.py, right? So that little bit of business logic that you wanted to throw in there, there it is. And then as soon as this finishes creating, we're going to get an output, and the output is going to, there we go. I can refresh that.
Almost done. Yeah. Now it should.
Check out the resources. This is the last thing. It's of course, yeah, the last one.
There
it is. So now I've got this endpoint, and not the most sophisticated bit of code, but look, this took just a few seconds, and we've got a publicly running bit of Python code that's right there on AWS. And you've got your whole config saved. You can commit this back, and it's just done. So really happy to be using DevSpaces for a lot of these bits of automation behind the scenes.
Yep. And I have to admit, AWS Lambda function URLs are currently my favorite service because it makes stitching together multiple, services together that are tied with some Lambda glue code so easy. That you can deploy. You can just literally take any functionality, deploy it as a function URL, and that's now available to you to stitch together as part of a larger chain. So, yeah, couldn't be more delighted about function URLs.
And what I'll do, I'll modify this template here to be a proper GitHub template, or you can just fork this and populate your own environment variables within DevSpaces. I'll have to update mine. Yeah, but all you have to do is fork this, set your AWS keys correctly, and there you go. You don't have to go through that whole process. You don't have to install SAM CLI locally. You don't have to make sure that you're running the right version of Python locally. No local setup at all. So I really like that. All right, well, let's go to the next segment. And I can see already that we're going to have to do a part 2 and maybe part 3 of this behind the scenes series. But let's keep going here and see where we get. Okay,